for gosh, what feels in my head like years, I always requested before my dad go down to the basement to put on the Bruce Springsteen greatest hits album from the living room so that I could hear it. And so I remember just falling asleep to that greatest hits record. And like, it's funny because, it kicks off with all those early songs, and then, it goes through his career. And then you kind of finish that album with two new tracks at that time, or maybe even three or four, maybe Murder Incorporated, Secret Garden, Blood Brothers, and This Hard Land. And like, I remember occasionally like being woken up, and having Murder Incorporated blaring out in the background, and me going like, man, wow, I missed like 10 years of his run here. But that's a vivid memory of mine, and a fun one when I look back, like, kind of having my dad like throw that on, and just be able to kind of go to sleep to the sounds of the Boss.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Set Listing Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson. Joining me from a very chilly Chicago is my new friend, Zack Heydorn. Zack, welcome to the show.
Great to be here. Heydorn, just FYI.
Heydorn. Heydorn. Got it.
But it's so good to be here, man. Thank you for having me.
Tell us a little about yourself.
Man, I'm a Chicago born and bred, or suburbs of Chicago anyway. And, I've got two girls who I love dearly, and a wife who I love dearly, and, doing our thing over here. And, there's three things that really kind of are me outside of that family, and it's pro wrestling, music, and sports. And so we can get into the pro wrestling later, and maybe the sports too, but music for me has always been a central part of just my whole life for as long as I can remember. It's so ingrained in me, and Bruce is a big part of that. But yeah, man, I mean, I'm just a guy doing my thing, dude.
So you talked about, music always being part of your life. I always like to start at the beginning. Talk to me about growing up. Talk to me about what kind of music did you listen to? Did your family listen to?
So my family and both of my parents are huge music people. And so that was all around for like I said, from the longest that I can remember back, we were listening to something, and it was, heavy Bruce Springsteen, a lot of the Beatles. In the car, when I was a really little kid, it was the oldies station on the radio constantly. And, Jackson Browne, Tom Petty, like I said, the Beatles, Springsteen, the Rolling Stones. So I was very much brought up with that as kind of the soundtrack, if you will. And when I mean soundtrack, I mean like, daily on the regular. My dad has a basement probably full of, tens of thousands of records. I mean, it's just been a central part of everything. I've been, going to concerts with them for quite some time. I mean, I remember, seeing Jackson Browne as a really little kid, and just like those. A vivid memory, a music memory of mine. Do you remember when those Beatles anthology CDs came out? Like, and they did the videos with them.
Yeah.
That's a vivid memory for me of like my dad coming home as those came out, like every month until all three were there, and just being so excited to like listen to those, fire those things up. So it's, it's rock and roll bass for sure. And then, my own tastes have kind of spun from there, some folk stuff, some kind of old style country, rap and hip hop too. Mm-hmm. So I feel like I have a pretty diverse palette, but it's because of all the different types of things that I listen to, all on the way, and just, appreciate just appreciate the uniqueness of different styles of music.
Yeah, as you started getting to high school and college, did you rebel against your parents' music, or did you always just acknowledge like, oh, I really love their stuff, but I'm going to find some of my own stuff as well?
Well, I never rebelled. No, never,
Okay.
nothing like that. It was more, I kind of at that time through like, middle school, high school, got into kind of some of the alternative stuff like the grungier, Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, the Green Days of the world. And really to this day still, love that music. That's kind of out of my folks' wheelhouse, but nothing that they don't appreciate either, but just not like,
Okay.
not, my dad's not going to throw on a Green Day CD. Probably he's probably not going to throw on Nirvana, but he does recognize and respect kind of like their place in music. So rebelling is definitely the wrong word. Certainly developed my own taste in certain directions, but never really rebelled. Like I still, like even like new bands that I pick up along the way now, to me, stem from the taste that I developed, all those years ago. Like there's some of that in everything that I listen to today.
So can you remember when you first discovered Bruce? And if you can, what about his music spoke to you?
So I don't remember exactly when I heard Bruce Springsteen for the very first time. But it had to be around like it was Born in the USA was the album that did it. And just only because, it came out, what was it, 1985 or something around then. And 1985, I think. So, when I was, 3, 4, 5 years old, like, that was spinning a lot in the house. So, and then from there, obviously, I recognized some of those songs. I know Glory Days was a big hit, for me early as a little kid, like loving just like the pace and the beat of that. I remember that song, being something that I was drawn to because of its energy. And, it's energy, but also it's kind of easy to follow lyrics, and just the overall tone and aura of the song is kind of, it's fun. It's a fun song. You don't need to know Bruce Springsteen in great detail to appreciate that track. So that stood out in a really big way. And then from there, it just was like a rabbit hole for me, like wanting to listen to Bruce all the time. I would have, for a little bit of story time here maybe, but when I was a little kid, like, my sister and I had our bedrooms upstairs, and kind of like the night activity was, my parents would, tuck us in, we'd bed, and then they'd go, down to the basement, watch TV or whatever, have the rest of the night. And, for gosh, what feels in my head like years, I always requested before my dad go down to the basement to put on the Bruce Springsteen Greatest Hits album from the living room so that I could hear it. And so I remember just falling asleep to that Greatest Hits record. And like, it's funny because, it kicks off with all those early songs, and then, it goes through his career. And then you kind of finish that album with two new tracks at that time, or maybe even 3 with, or 4, maybe Murder Incorporated, Secret Garden, Blood Brothers, and This Hard Land. And like, I remember occasionally like being woken up, and having Murder Incorporated blaring out in the background, and me going like, man, wow, I missed like 10 years of his run here. But that's a vivid memory of mine, and a fun one when I look back, like, kind of having my dad like throw that on, and just be able to kind of go to sleep to the sounds of the Boss.
That's awesome. You talked about your other passion is pro wrestling. Where did that start? When did you first discover that, and what about that made you go, okay, this is something pretty cool?
I think there's a lot of like, when I break it down, and if I can sit and actually think about this, there's a lot of similarities as to like what drew me to pro wrestling and Bruce Springsteen. Like, because Bruce Springsteen, he's a tremendous, songwriter and a musician and an artist, but the guy's also, a star.
Right.
Superstar. I mean, he's a rock star in every sense. And, so I was certainly drawn to that charisma and like the performance, and the idea that somebody could walk out onto a stage in front of thousands and thousands of people and manipulate them and have them like right in the palm of their hand. And so I have the same kind of connection, or had the same kind of connection to pro wrestling when I saw it for the first time. Like the Steve Austins of the world was a big kind of like a big hook. That's kind of when I started. And then, obviously then I went back into the Flair and Hogan days, but it started with Austin. And I think a lot of it is the same type of, obviously different art, but the same type of presence, the same type of charisma that just focuses your attention. And so it was that got me rolling with pro wrestling. I can't quite say exactly when it was or what angle it was, but it was Steve Austin for sure. And then my grandfather actually was a huge wrestling fan from, back in the 40s and 50s, like from a long time ago. So when I started getting into it, that was something that him and I really bonded over throughout the years, and would watch together on a weekly basis. And so he kind of then solidified that interest and got me, kind of hooked on the history and being able to know where to go into the backlogs of or the back streets of wrestling, if you will.
Yeah.
To really kind of find out about the history. And that's where I kind of got my pro wrestling roots from, was him. So I think, the kind of the premise of both interests is very similar, that obviously land in two completely different directions though.
Yeah. So Austin was the guy, he was your Born in the USA into wrestling, right? Like Born in the USA is the gateway CD for a lot of a lot of Bruce fans. So Austin was your wrestling, right?
That's correct. Yep. Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. Good way to put it.
My son is 32, and Goldberg was his first wrestling love.
There you go.
And then WrestleMania is coming to Dallas again in just probably as we're recording this a couple of weeks, and we're going again. I'm going with him on Saturday night. Then him and his buddy are going Sunday night, and we went to the WrestleMania that was at the Astrodome, or as Chris says, where Stone Cold turned heel.
Yes, man, I'm so jealous to hear that. Like, number one, that's arguably one of the biggest events in wrestling history, just because of it's the peak Attitude Era. It's Austin Rock at their peak times as well. So boy, oh boy, what a treat that must have been.
Well, it was hilarious because he's like 7th, 8th grade, right? And and he had loved wrestling for a long time. And he was like, I can't believe WrestleMania is going to be in Houston, right? And we live in Dallas. And so I just kind of, as a side note, well, I tell you what, you get straight A's, we'll go to WrestleMania. And then I went and, and I told my wife, and I said, hey, I'm going to go ahead and order tickets. We'll just make it a guys' night weekend, right? So, and he did. He got straight A's. And so we drove down to Houston, spent the day, doing the exhibits and having a great time. And, we're at the WrestleMania, and he's like, can I throw up the finger, Dad? Yes, you can throw up the finger. And he just, I had a great time because he had a great time.
Sure.
But every time I tell that story to someone who loves wrestling, they will say, you were at one of the best WrestleManias ever.
Yep.
And so he is all excited about us going again. He is like that 12-year-old kid again that we're pumped about getting to go go together. So yeah,
well, I can't wait to hear your and his thoughts, all these years later, because in some ways it's very much the same, but in other ways, it's changed drastically. Yeah. So it'll be real interesting to see kind of your talk, and you'll get a Steve Austin appearance on Saturday.
Yes,
so that's good.
Chris bought tickets before because he said, I'm hearing rumors that Steve may come make an appearance. And if he does, ticket prices are going to go through the roof, Dad. We need to get them first. So yeah, we're excited.
Great.
So how did you decide, or how did it work in that you're doing this for a gig, covering wrestling? And is that your main gig, or is that just a sideline?
It's a side gig right now. So I've got another full-time job that I work as well. Just to help pay those bills that come in the mail every month.
But you got 2 kids to raise. That's
right. Yeah, they like to eat. I mean, God,
yes.
Go figure. But so I honestly, I got into it really. It started, God, I would say 2015 was when I kind of really first started. And I, when I was younger, like in my, mid-20s, just kind of figuring out like the other career, right? Like, just getting my feet under me, like getting the life together, and I didn't really, I watched everything during that time too, but just didn't, I don't know, for whatever reason, didn't have the discipline to kind of figure out, all right, how do I want to make this happen? Because it was always something that I wanted to do, be a part of the wrestling business in some capacity. And so, I look back at that time and go, man, I wish I would have started early, but sometimes you got to just get your shit together, which is what I was doing at that time. But 2015 rolls around. I'm in a new relationship where my now wife, who, was encouraging of like, hey, you should like do something with this. Like you love to write, you love to watch wrestling, you have a radio background, so you're comfortable in front of a microphone. Like you should, give it a shot. And so knowing that like it was a long shot in terms of like, hey, can you make real money with this? It was just very much, just a really intense hobby of mine since 2015. So I hopped on with a website called PWP Nation, and that's where I got my start. And my time there was really, really fun because it was a straight hobby, but they were really flexible in terms of like what you could write. There was not like, hey, you're on this beat and you're only on this beat and
right.
And that's it. It was like, just write what you want. And so I did. Mm-hmm. And got a little, met some people and just had some really, fun engagement with the team there. And then the Torch was always a place where I, consumed my wrestling analysis from, as long as I can remember. And so when I kind of had what I felt was a comfortable and, solid enough portfolio of work, I just started to email Wade and just kind of talk to him about my work and what my aspirations were, in terms of, getting a writing project.
Yeah.
It took a couple tries to connect with him. My first piece of work for the Torch was a guest editorial on Roman Reigns, and the rest from there is kind of history. I picked up the 205 Live was actually covering the Mae Young Classic, first Mae Young Classic, which was the all women's tournament that they held at the NXT at Full Sail, the NXT studios. I covered that when that was going on, and so that was my first beat. And from there, I signed on to do 205 Live on a regular basis when that was, it was never a hot show, but like, it was something. And then from that, I was able to parlay that into taking over the Alternative Perspective Monday Night Raw report, which is a little bit more of a, high profile column, throughout the week. So I did that for a couple years, and then all along the way, podcasting with Wade, I was on his post shows for Raw, for SmackDown. I would write, periodically some editorials just to get more work there. And then I picked up my own VIP audio show, which is called On the Canvas, and it's a show that like looks at the art of pro wrestling. So I started doing that, and then like at the beginning of 2021, I just kept telling Wade like what my goals were with it, and wanting to do more, be more involved with like the day-to-day operations of the site. Mm-hmm. so that point, I had enough, I think, just enough equity with him. And, I think he saw some of the work that I did and knew that I could maybe handle a little bit more, and was able to kind of grab the assistant editor position. So, which is what I currently hold today. So it was a long journey, but a really fun one. And, one that I look back on very fondly, just because it was such a blast. And now, there's so much wrestling to cover on a week-to-week basis that, we're never short on content. That's for sure.
Do you, wrestling has gone through, and we're going to get to Bruce again, I promise listeners. Wrestling has gone through ups and downs, and for the longest time, right? You had WCW and WWE, and so, but there's even more diversity out there now, isn't there?
There is, yeah. I mean, and I think you can kind of to me, one of the big reasons for that is access. There's infinite access to different pro wrestling now with streaming. You don't have to drive across the country to see an indie show on the West Coast. You don't have to, if you're on the West Coast, you don't have to drive to Chicago to see an AEW show. Like it's on Fight TV. And so like that unlocks just so many, not to mention like international stuff. So if you want it, you can find it out there. And that's a really kind of interesting part of the business right now. And it certainly has its pros, and I think it has some cons too, where it's like there's so much that there's no way you can track every up and coming, independent star out there, because there's just so much of it that's on the table. So yeah, and not only is there a lot on the table to just watch, but it's all super diverse in terms of style. Like if you want kind of like the big national level shows, well, WWE, AEW, but even those two are very different in terms of their presentation. But you go from there, and there's studio show in the NWA. You've got the hardcore deathmatch stuff with GCW. You've got the kind of the flip flying PWG style out west. Ring of Honor is going to be coming back, which has so many independent roots and has started the careers of so many top stars today. That's out there. There's like the blood sport style, Josh Barnett's blood sport style, no ropes, and just kind of like just a fight. That's there too. So it's really diverse time in the business in terms of that style. And I think it just like it always has. Wrestling business changes, and I think generally like the business is stronger when it's a star first business. And I think the two top promotions, WWE and AEW in the States right now, have kind of went away from that and are very much about the brand these days. But hey, like if that's it's not gonna be the last time the wrestling business changes around.
Yeah, and I think the same thing can be said for music, right? Because of the ability of you can record music, throw it up on YouTube, and find an audience.
Right.
Same thing as podcasting, right? Like I didn't have to. I ended up was with a network, but they ended up deciding to quit being a network, and so now then I'm an indie podcast, and true, I don't have millions of followers, but I've got enough people that are saying, hey, we like what you're saying, Jesse, we want to hear you. So I think the same thing, right? Like you can have that the ability to, you don't have to go to a UHF channel and say, hey, like I'm old enough to remember Saturday afternoons after all cartoons are on, they would go to Alexandria, Louisiana, where there'd be wrestling. Right. That they would cut and they'd show that. So I do think that's one of the reasons why there's diversity, right?
For sure. And for people that are going to be fans of wrestling, like, I mean, it's just going to be like a water hose for them, because a fire hose, I guess, is the right right word, but because there's just so much. I mean, and there's so much current stuff. And so it's like, man, if you want to attempt to go backwards, and check out old NWA stuff or AWA stuff or WWE stuff or anything like there's just so much there. So on one hand, just like with me, it can be overwhelming to I always thought myself in the music space, like, hey, I'm going to be, with the curve, right? Like, and I'm gonna know, the hot bands and artists and whatever.
Yeah.
And then Lollapalooza lineup comes out, and I'm like, God damn, Green Day and Metallica are great, but who the heck are these other people? But there's so much stuff out there, and it's all on Spotify, and you pay $10 a month and you get it all. And the same thing with wrestling.
Yeah, absolutely. When you, I always like to tell, say this, but I realize that the amount of times you've seen Bruce perform live is not a fair barometer of how big of a fan you are. It depends your age, where you're located, your economic situation. But have you been able to see him perform live? And if so, do you count?
Well, I don't like keep a running count, but I counted for this. And I've seen him 9 times. And the first time I saw him was on the reunion in 1999. Yeah. That was when, I was a freshman in high school at that time. And he was back with the E Street Band. And so I didn't see any of that, none of the human touch stuff, none of the, nothing there, nothing, with Tunnel of Love. But when they picked up after that reunion tour, that was the first time I saw him. And then from there, I caught him every time he's been here, whether it was the Rising tour or the tour for Magic, which was a couple of United Center shows. I saw him up in Milwaukee on the Seeger Sessions tour, so I saw him there. I caught him at Wrigley. I've seen him at USL. I got a really fun story for the time I saw him at US Cellular Field. Okay. When you remember, and this was 2003. So they were still, that's almost 20 years ago. But at that time, Ticketmaster was you could go online and do it, but you could also you could go to Carson Peary Scott, and they had a Ticketmaster terminal in the store. Right. And so you could go there and, get your concert tickets, And so for that show, it was for an August show, and the show was going to be the night before I left for college in the morning. So my family, my dad and I, my mom, we went to that show, but I, went to Carson Peary Scott to get those tickets that spring or something. Yeah. And I was the first pick in the lottery for tickets, or second pick, second pick. And so needless to say, I was ready there to buy 4 tickets, and we had this other guy who was like, "Oh man, you're so lucky. How many tickets are you buying to the show?" And I said, "Well, I'm going for 4." And he said, "Well, would you mind going for 8? We're way in the back, and I've never seen Bruce before, first time ever. I'm worried I'm not going to get any. Would you mind buying 8? Here's the cash." And I was a high school kid, so I was like, sure, no big deal. So we get so I second in line, get up there, and we get eighth row, just amazing seat. Yeah. And so go about my business, go away, super pumped, right? But then we get there that day, that day of the show, and the guy is right next to us. Sure. And so I'm loving it. They open the show with Adam Ray's Decay, and just a blistering version of it to kick things off. And I turned to my right, and the guy who we bought tickets for, he had said, "Hey, you guys want something to drink? You guys want hot dogs or whatever? Whatever. It's on us." And I turned to my right as this rocking first song is going, and he could care less, Jesse. He's sitting there, and I'm like, what on earth is happening? And then I look to my right, or to his right, and his wife is going crazy, in tears that she's seeing Bruce for the first time. And he turned to me and goes, "See, man, this that's a Bruce fan right there. So he wasn't even a fan. He was just trying to get his
Just
wife
doing that for his wife.
Just doing that for his wife to get her, and she was having the time of her life. And I look back on it, it was just a cool night with that happening, and great seats, a great set list, and kind of like a God, and I don't want to be over dramatic about it, but like a stamp at the end of my childhood with me going to college the next day. It was like such a poetic way to kind of end that era of my life.
That's awesome. That is a good story. That's great. Are there songs that mean a lot to you? Are there things that, albums or songs that you continue to go through, that mean a lot to you, that you go to over and over again?
There absolutely is. I mean, Darkness on the Edge of Town is an album that I think spoke to me, not in like even like, wow, those lyrics are me, or like, because it's not that. It's like, it's not, I didn't live any of that stuff that Bruce talks about in that record, but the tone and like the sound and the production, like, just, I think, when I look at him in the cover art, and you see this young guy who's there, but a little bit of concern, not a little bit of doubt in his eyes, like, that was me, like in my 20s, and so I can relate with like the tone of that record, and I remember playing that record a lot during that time, and it's such a masterpiece in kind of being an adult, but still like telling the story of being an adult, but still growing up at the same time, and like having responsibilities, but not fully understanding what they are, or how to go about, achieving them and living with them. So that is an album that absolutely speaks to me regularly. And I think it's an enjoyable listen, even if you just want to listen to something, but I think it has some deeper meaning for me just because of its tone. So that absolutely, Born in the USA, like, I'll catch a lot of flack for this because, I know it's it can be among Bruce fans a cliche, like, go to, oh, that's the best album. And, look, I'm not here to debate best or not best, but that is a freaking monster of an album. Like, like, there's nothing wrong with a popular pop record, which is what that is. And it's a master. I mean, it's awesome. So what, on a summer day, grilling out in the yard, like, nothing better than that record to fire up. And then the other one that speaks to me now, for kind of a reason that I wouldn't have ever felt when it came out, is The Rising. So my daughter is 3 years old, and she just like me when I was a kid, there's music on here all the time, in a vast array, just like it was for me. And so she loves Bruce, like Ghost, or not Ghost, the Letters to You came out right when she was able to, like, when she was about 1 and almost 2 when that came out. And so she was hooked on the song Ghost for the longest time, and thought that was the only Bruce song to listen to for the longest time. And so for Christmas, then I was like, well, I'm going to get her own Bruce Springsteen record. And, I just was like, well, I have all these other ones already, so I'm not going to like rebuy, Born to Run to the River or anything like that. So what vinyl do I not have? And it was Rising. So I'm like, all right, well, we'll get her The Rising. And man, she loves that damn record. I mean, my goodness gracious, I can't play Waiting on a Sunny Day or Mary's Place more times to saturate her
awesome
zest for her. And so that album has a really big place in my heart right now, just because of the way she just attacked that thing. So that's it's not a record that speaks to me in any way, because it's the greatest hits album, but that will always be a part of my Bruce fandom and memories, like,
because you grew up listening to it, right? I mean, that
absolutely
makes a lot of sense. That makes a whole lot of sense. So is only the one daughter a fan, or are both of them?
Well, I like to think my other daughter is too, but she's only 11 months old, so I don't know yet.
Okay, she's got time to build.
She's got some time. I can still coach her up.
Uh-huh. So flipping back to wrestling, do you have a favorite wrestler, a modern, or do you like Chris keeps going back to the classics? He just loves watching, and he watches the new stuff, but he loves going back to the older and watching a lot of the WWE documentaries, like with The Undertaker and all
Yeah.
this other stuff. He loves Austin's talk show. So how
Yep.
about you? Are you're still a fan, but you also cover it. So is there a sentimental favorite of yours?
So Austin always will be. I
Mhm.
think when I put the kind of the journalist hat down and just like
Yeah,
think about just being a fan. Like, yeah, he like that glass breaking is always going to be a
yeah,
thing that gets me for sure. So yeah, him for absolutely. These days I don't. It's weird. I think as wrestling changes, how you watch it changes too. And so
right.
now I watch it not to cheer on my favorite. My favorite guy
Yeah.
or woman. I watch it to enjoy the matches, but also kind of analyze the matches too. What's working? Where the art in those? Like, what is it?
Hmm.
How are they booking this? What are they going for? So it's just with a different. I just watch it. I enjoy it just as much, but just from a different perspective. So I wouldn't really say that I have a favorite right now that in terms of like who I root for, but in terms of like the work that I like to watch, on the WWE side of things, Roman Reigns has really, as a heel, turned into just a major, major star. He's found his groove, and kind of has finally tapped into, I think, his real personality and allowing that to shine through with his character. So he's somebody that I enjoy. And that I enjoy watching work. Adam Cole in AEW is another guy who I think is incapable of having a bad match. Like the pace that he has in the ring, the crispness of what he does, the way he sells is phenomenal. So I enjoy watching him quite a bit. Sasha Banks is somebody else in WWE who is just fascinating to watch because she's, just an absolute star, and really knows how to tell a story in the ring and how to use her charisma and psychology to pull a reaction out of the audience. So she's somebody that I really enjoy watching. Trying to think here of anybody like some other AEW folks or some independent guys, but those three are kind of like CM Punk. I'm interested in him these
Yeah.
days to see what he's doing and how his comeback's going, and it's been really good. MJF is another guy in AEW, really a young talent and just a guy who gets being a heel, not looking for any kind of cool NWO heel pops, looking for some real heat, and he gets it. So he's a fun guy to watch too.
Okay, very nice. What's next on the podcast? What do you guys got planning to do next for the podcast?
So not this week. Well, so let me back up. The last 2 weeks, I did. So CM Punk and MJF had a pretty brutal dog collar, and when I say brutal, I mean violent, and bloody. Not bad. Really great dog collar match at the AEW Revolution pay-per-view. So for the last 2 weeks, the podcast has been on breaking that match down frame by frame. So it's about almost 100 minutes of me breaking down that match from start to finish, entrances. And then the match. So that's been the last 2 weeks. So if you guys are interested in checking that out, it's a real good sample of what that show is with those last 2 weeks specifically. This week, I'm going to be looking at the Becky Lynch. She cut a WrestleMania promo this week on Raw that I'm gonna analyze and break down. And then next week is the big WrestleMania preview show. So I'll have a couple guests on from the Torch family, and we will be breaking down all things WrestleMania, top to bottom, both nights, and just getting the listeners and our readers ready for that big weekend.
Yeah, it's gonna be a crazy one. It'll be Jerry World will be pretty rocking, so that's good. All right, so talk to me. What were your thoughts about Letter to You and Western Stars? The latest two from Bruce.
So Letters to You, I thought is a really good album, and for me and Bruce, it's like I don't go into like his new albums with the expectation of like, oh, okay, this has to be better than the big three, like River,
Yeah.
Darkness, and Border. Like because look, if you make 15 albums, you're gonna have one that's the best, and you're gonna have one that's the worst. Like that's
Right.
just like they're not all gonna be like that peak level stuff. So I don't go into his new releases or really anybody's like with that kind of like ready to judge an album in that way. I really take them as their own. And I think when you do that with Letters to You, you've got a really nice buttoned up record, you know, that sounds like Bruce and sounds like the E Street Band. And so there's some really good tracks on there. Like I said, I'll never forget the words to Ghost because we've played it thousands of times in this house because of my daughter. But that song is really good. Janie's a Shooter. I mean, that's a great tune. That's such that is a like anthemic E Street Band song. Like I'm pumped to hear that thing live, like when if and when he tours again. So I think top to bottom, it's a really good record. Western Stars, I'm a little bit colder on, just because I think personally, to me, it lacks a little bit of the oomph that I like out of the Bruce records. I think lyrically, it's a very interesting listen in terms of following kind of the stories that he's telling from a lyric perspective. But musically, though, I think it misses for me in terms of like judging. If I look at how I feel about some of his other folkier records, that one falls to the bottom of my personal list there.
Okay, very nice.
Well, what do you think? Am I like
no? Well, so I grew up. Glenn Campbell, my mom loved, and so Western Stars to me feels like a short story collection, like Elmore Leonard, you know, the guy who wrote Justified, could have written those, you know, songs, and so their story. So I like that. I love the film. I was so jealous of everyone in the barn. I was like, oh man, I wish I was in that barn. That barn
I
is
know.
So cool. In fact, my wife whispered over, she's like, you want to be there, don't you? I'm like, yes, I do.
Of course I do.
And then Letter to You, I similar to what you said, it is hard for me at times to break away context. So, for example, I know intellectually Devils and Dust is probably not that great of a CD. It's a good CD, but, you know, like compared to if you put it up against Nebraska, right? It's like, okay. Right. But The Rising was my first show. So I have a lot of love for The Rising. And then Devils and Dust was the first CD that came out after I'd seen Bruce live. And I devoured that CD, just played it over and over and over again. And then when he came to Dallas, like I knew every song that he played off of it. And so that was kind of the first tour where I had gone from a casual fan to a major fan. So Letter to You, we just had ended this 2020 was such a crap year, and so much death and so much sickness and so much political strife. And, you know, I had said if we could get a new president and a new Springsteen album, and maybe 2020 won't be the year of the worst year ever, you know. And so the election happened, and not to get into politics, but, you know, I was pleased that, you know, our, you know, President Trump wasn't reelected. And then, to get this album that's the E Street Band, and all of a sudden there's this Apple documentary and you're seeing the band work together. It's just like to put it in the sports thing, it's like, wow, Ali all of a sudden regained magic and was like this great boxer again. And to have something that strong that toward the latter part of their career, I won't say the end of their career, is just a really treasure for us.
That's really well said, man. I mean, it is so true. And I don't want to forget to ask this question because I've been doing some battle on the old Twitter machine. Nebraska. I mean, I love that record. I mean, I absolutely adore that record. As dark can be, but I love the side of Bruce that it shows. Like there's, you know, because you get performer Bruce, right? And you get, you know, Bruce who, you know, who's a ham on stage, like that's there. But artist Bruce is in there too. And that album to me is just rooted in that kind of that mastery. Like it's, and I don't know that enough people feel the way I do. This is my mission now. This is my mission now, Jeff.
Well, and I get you, Zach. And a lot of people do think of this, a lot of people, if they're like fans of punk, they will say, oh, well, Nebraska is my favorite song, album, because it is a very different type of album.
Yep.
And so, yeah, I like it. I don't love it. But it's because there isn't as many songs that speak to me. However, Highway Patrolman would probably make my top 10 favorite songs of all time.
Right.
Though
right.
I might argue that the Johnny Cash version I like a little bit more than Bruce's, but just because Johnny Cash is freaking Johnny Cash, and he's like,
it's
that's
hard to
just
argue with Johnny Cash. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and I say that with love in my heart, right? Like, because he does such a good job of that. So yeah, I think there is no shame. I think the tougher thing, and I've had people on that adore Working on a Dream, and that is a lot of people will go, oh, really? That's your favorite? But there are people that just, they love that album. And I think that's the beauty of Bruce, is that there's something for all of us, right? And there's something that, and he has so many stages of his career, so many different, he keeps reinventing himself, similar to, Mankind, or where
Chris Jericho.
There are wrestlers that keep reinventing himself. I've been told Mick Foley is a huge Springsteen fan, and
really?
So I have been told that, and I would love, like, if that is the case, to have him on and just talk. How fun would that be, right?
Oh man, that would be tremendous listen. Absolutely, man.
My favorite story of him, he was here in Dallas multiple years ago at a what they call ticket stock. Our sports station would kind of their version of a fan get together, right? So he was the featured person there. That was their guest, and he was signing free autographs for the fans, and they were interviewing him. And I think he tells the story in his book, but I love this because my son and I are on the way to tickle stock, and he's so excited. He had an extra sock that he was going to have him sign, and everything. And he said that he was wrestling in Dallas at the Sportatorium, and his girlfriend at the time came up to him and said, Mick, I have a question for you. He goes, okay, what? Is wrestling fake? He says, why are you asking? He says, well, everything you own is in your car, and you are scheduled to do a loser leaves town match. And he goes, well, let's move on. So,
he's not going to give away the farm. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So that's awesome.
That's great. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. What a story.
Yeah. What are songs you're chasing? When he performs again, what are things that you're hoping that you're going to hear him perform?
So
live.
Here's the thing. This is Murder Incorporated is on the list. Number one.
Oh, sure. I could see that. Yeah. Because
and the reason
you're a kid, right?
Yes, it's my memory as like when my dad would put that CD on, like I remember waking up like after I'd fallen asleep and the album had already played through, but that song was on, and it's just a pretty badass song. But so that's one of them. Now they played that song at the reunion show that I went to, but I have no memory of it, zero. And so it would mean a lot more to me now listening to that song live. So that's my number one. Trapped was one that I had on my list for the longest time, and I actually sent just on a whim, I sent a tweet to like the Springsteen Twitter account back in 2012 or whenever they did the Wrigley show, saying like, hey, you guys should play Trapped. Then that night played that, so I was able to check that off the list. Then pretty fun story there. And then I guess like I'd love to hear some of the darkness stuff. Like I've heard a lot of it, but I haven't necessarily heard like Something in the Night or Racing in the Street. Some of those deeper songs, like
Sure.
Prove It All Night I've heard, Adam Raised the King I've heard, Badlands obviously, but I would love to kind of hear those other some of those other songs kind of in a live setting. I just have not been lucky enough to hear it, and it's an album that that resonates
Sure.
so deeply, and it's not because of the big hit songs on there. Those are good, but those three that I mentioned are super high in my kind of hierarchy
Sure.
of Bruce songs. Like those are there, and I haven't heard any of those live. And then I guess, man, the only other one that kind of rings out to me is it's off Born in the USA, and because I've heard a lot of that album too,
Right.
like the No Surrenders, Darlington County, and everything there, but I've not heard Cover Me, and I would love to hear that, maybe as an opener or something, just to hear that,
Sure.
that start, would be a really cool treat.
Good. Any final thoughts before we get to the Mary question?
So no, man, I just I think Bruce Springsteen is just an American icon. I mean, I really believe that, on Bob Dylan levels, to me, in terms of just how he's been able to write about people, and about humans and about emotion. And I think it's so, what his body of work, I just think is so special. And just special for anybody to just study in terms of art, but also just for me personally, in terms of just being a constant in my life for as long as I can remember to this day, and now for my kids. So, I mean, seriously, normally it's me in a room with a record and that's it, and now it's my kids there too. My dad was there, and so I've never had a forum to just kind of talk about Bruce Springsteen. So this has been just a blast, and I thank you, and I thank you very much for having me.
Well, Zach, I am so glad you joined me. You are welcome anytime. I don't know. I may have you join Chris and I, and we'll do a special post WrestleMania, roundtable, and so we could visit that. That sounds great.
That sounds like a blast.
So if you are a regular listener on the Canvas and you're joining me because you want to hear Zach, thank you for listening. I appreciate it. I end every episode with the Mary question. What that is Jay Armstrong is a recently retired honors English teacher. He has a book out called Bedtime Stories for the Living. And Jay would, when he was teaching, would spend 2 days breaking apart Thunder Road. They would look at all the lyrics. They would talk about the imagery. They would talk about, the themes Bruce is exploring, and they would compare it to Robert Frost, The Road Not Taken, and other great American poems. And then at the end of the 2 days, he would ask his class, does Mary get in the car? So Zach, that is your question. Does Mary get in the car at the end of Thunder Road?
Of course, Mary gets in the car. Absolutely, she does. And look, I think you can get there. So when I was analyzing this,
okay,
I think you can get there from a lyric perspective. When you break that down. But I also think the whole idea of the song has to end that way. It's about, getting on an open road. You have your whole life in front of you and just going. And so I think to have her not get in the car at the end is just not, it doesn't jive with the premise and the tone and the feel of the song. So to me, maybe to some people, and maybe I'm the only one that's answered this way, I don't know, but I think it's obvious she gets in the car. I think it's an obvious yes for me.
No, 60% of my guests say yes, she gets in the car. About 40% say she doesn't. So,
no.
Yeah. So no, you are in the majority, my friend.
All right. Well, hey, that's good.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been a lot of fun. I appreciate it. Good luck continuing with your podcast and your writing. And, like I said, open door. Anytime you've like, hey, Jesse, I've got to talk a little bit of Bruce, just reach out to me and we'll make it happen. Okay.
I appreciate that, man. Thank you so much. Enjoy WrestleMania. It should be a
Yeah.
real fun night. And I'm excited to pick your brain about it afterwards too. Thank you so much for having me, Jesse.
No problem. If someone wants to reach you, how can they? What's the best way?
You can get me on Twitter at Z Heydorn Torch. ZHEYDORN Torch.
Very great. All right. Listeners, please go get vaccinated, go get boosted. Let's all be kind to each other because that's how we're going to get through this. Thank you, Zach. Thank you, listener. We'll talk to you soon. Goodbye. This podcast would not be possible without my wonderful group of patrons. I want to send a special thanks to John Munson, Mary Thomas, Terry Smith, Dale Hosick, Andrew Goddard, Stephen Malio, Alex Samada, Anna Lynn, Chris Bloom, Holly Mack, and Captain America, aka Steve Rogers. Thank you guys for supporting the podcast. Your support means the world to me, and you are forever in my heart. You just heard the fun talking, hard rocking, music loving, album ranking, fan thanking, joy spreading, lyric reading, story sharing podcast that is the one, the only Set Listing Bruce. The theme for Set Listing Bruce was written by David Rosen, used by permission.